you there.
Shyness and come forward once in a while and say something.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Why don't we get, yeah, we'll get started, and
Be on there.
Matt's
soon.
joining quickly. So we'll get started. We're expecting a couple more councils to join us, and they can go back and watch the watches to get caught up. So we are going to get a presentation of the comprehensive plan from Isabel Oxley, our town planner. Isabel, thank you for all your, thank you and thank the committee for, the comprehensive planning committee, chaired by Phil Ruck, has just done a remarkable job and a remarkable amount of work over the last little more than a year, probably. And maybe we'll hear about that as part of this, but thank you.
Thank you. And thank you guys for having me tonight. So just to give you a little overview of what we'll end up covering, I will run through the public engagement summary and a very quick summary of the work we've done over, it was actually almost 18 months at this point. We will run through what we've heard and then tie it all together through the priority goals and the future land use info and vision. I do have one slide on next steps and what comes next after this. And then I do want to leave some time if you guys have any questions as well. So just to jump right in terms of public engagement, back in the fall of 2024, we held an online survey on our social pinpoint site, which was sort of the hub for public engagement over the course of this effort. That received 244 responses. And then we also held some public kickoff meetings over the course of 2 days in October of last year. That netted us 26 attendees over 2 days. And then from the online survey and those initial public kickoff meetings where we had some high-level conversations with folks about what they were interested in learning more about and discussing in greater detail, we came up with 5 really in-depth topics that were worthy of further exploration. So in November and December of last year, we held some topic exploration meetings specific to those, which were housing, the economy, but more specifically downtown, active transportation, and then outdoor recreation and natural resources. In January, Clint came on board and we held we called it the Your Voice Matters Visioning event. That had about 40 attendees, and again, high-level conversations that really ended up informing the vision statement that I'll share in just a second. And then in July of this year, to sort of sum up everything that we had heard thus far, we had some future land use workshops. Those over a few days had about 30 attendees, and we got some more location-specific feedback about our designated growth areas and the designated rural areas that I'll talk about at the end of this presentation. So just to underscore, here's a framework pyramid, and it's displayed this way because the community values, which tend to be really broad, these broad core principles embraced by the community that end up informing the community's vision. We attempt to distill those down into a vision statement, really a high-level statement describing the kind of community that Orono wants to be in the future. It's drafted such that it sort of represents how we hope to be in 10 years, so in 2035, which is sort of the expiration date of this plan update. And then we have a number of goals, objectives, and actions, getting more and more specific. So the goals are, again, broad aspirational statements that help make the community vision a reality. The objectives are a little bit more specific direction for how the goals will end up being carried out. And then the action steps I like to think of as if the council printed out the action steps on the implementation matrix and treated it as a checklist, that would ultimately get us to meeting our objectives, our goals, and ultimately that vision that we've set for ourselves. The actions themselves, though, I just want to note up front, I had asked Maddie to print you out the implementation matrix. So anything numbered ABC is one of the action steps. These are the most specific, but also the most squishy and most subject to change. So as long as we are meeting our goals and objectives, ultimately the carrying out of those actions, the implementation steps, can sort of be how the council wishes and how staff, as they change, may have better and different ideas to accomplish the same goals and objectives, but ultimately we want some very clear direction for goals and objectives, with actions, changing over the course of 10 years in some cases. So I talked a little bit about the survey questions and all of the conversations that we had, and those were really in an attempt to better understand what the community hopes that this document will address, and is really a snapshot in time about what the current priorities of the community are. So throughout these efforts, some fairly clear community values started to emerge. Those were things like community cohesion, having a diversity of businesses, and specifically businesses that meet the day-to-day needs of residents, ensuring economic vitality, making sure that we have exciting events and things going on, but also, that our businesses are thriving. Increasing housing options for throughout the lifespan and for all ages, increasing or maintaining public service capacity, and then reducing vehicular traffic or increasing alternative modes of transportation like walking and biking. And again, highlighting those priority focus areas. These were really what the community told us that they were most interested in exploring in depth, and sort of rose to the level of highest priority. And these were, again, housing, active transportation, downtown development, the economy, outdoor recreation, natural resources. So we took all of this and we created this vision statement. We also have a number of priority goals that sort of are wrapped up in this vision statement. But ultimately what we came up with, and I believe I shared this with you at my last check-in, it was in draft form at the time, was Orono is a walkable, bikeable, outdoors-oriented community serving as the gateway to the Maine wilderness and located on the ancestral lands of the Penobscot Nation. As the proud home of the University of Maine's flagship campus, Orono is a culturally rich haven that brings people together through diverse events and abundant economic opportunities. We nurture the growth of our beloved small town in harmony with the dynamic energy that being a university community offers. We are a pinnacle of diversity and friendly neighborhoods, which ensures that everyone feels at home and thrives in our community. We recognize resiliency and sustainability in all of our decision making. Finally, we work together to tackle common problems, provide mutual support, respect one another's diversity, all towards this shared common vision. And that last paragraph, or last sentence rather, is really getting at that community cohesion that we kept hearing over and over, which is great in a world that's sort of increasingly divided. Community cohesion as a top priority of the community that we were hearing from is a great objective. So I want to share the priority goals and objectives that we've come up with. I'm not getting into the level of action statements because, again, those are a little bit more squishy, a little bit more subject to change over the next 10 years as new technologies and new staff come on board and all of that. But I do want to make sure that we're on the same page about priority goals and objectives. I also want to note that these should not be construed as the only priorities of the plan, but rather they were used to decide on the time frame for pursuing actions. So in most cases, the priority goals that I'm about to share will be pursued in the first 5 years of the planning effort, with the other goals being pursued in the second 5 years. And then the full action steps, if you are curious, are included in the implementation matrix that should have been shared with you. But is also in the full plan document. So, I also should note that goals and policies with an asterisk next to them, so a star next to them, are required to be included in every municipality's comprehensive plan by the state. So if you're seeing something with an asterisk, that's what that means. So I talked about our big ideas revolving around housing. The goal here is attainable housing, matching the council's goals, through a combination of both regulation and incentives. The objectives are creating opportunities for home ownership within the designated growth area, emphasizing families with school-age children in support of the community and the region's economic development, aiming for at least 10% of all new residential development in the next decade to be subsidized or regulated senior affordable, inclusive of those with disabilities and or workforce housing. That 10% number is from the state, and we narrowed it down a little bit to both senior, affordable, and workforce, because that's what the data in the housing section of the plan is really showing us that we need. And then finally, amends the land use controls to stimulate the production of attainable housing. So that's defined here. The second big idea was around the economy. This has 3 big goals attached to it. So grow our workforce to allow for a diversity of businesses that meet the daily needs of residents to locate here, daily needs of the community at large, really. Amend the town's land use ordinance to stimulate the production of new year-round housing. So growing our workforce requires some level of housing investment. Promoting cultural amenities and working with partners to create festivals, events, and plenty of points of interest to explore for all age groups. Really creating opportunities, as the council already does, for volunteer-led, inexpensive, short-term community art projects, demonstrations, cultural amenities. And then finally, enhancing feet on the street, which really is just a jargony term for more people living and working in and around downtown. So amending the standards of the village commercial zoning district to allow offices, salons, barbershops, or other flexible uses that would meet the everyday needs of residents. Looking to Mill Street, Pine Street, and the neighborhoods to the north of the existing downtown as opportunities for new residential growth. That's reflected in the future land use map. And then working with owners of vacant properties to fill vacancies that would serve with businesses that would serve day-to-day needs of residents. With regard to outdoor recreation and natural resources, really enhancing or expanding access to natural environments for recreation, maintaining and improving existing recreational facilities as necessary to meet both current and future needs. We anticipate more planning would need to be involved in that to actually understand what future needs might be. This plan is a very high-level overview with regards to recreation, but we are recommending further information. Strengthening our image as a scenic river town by enhancing our connection to the river, and then seeking to achieve or continuing to maintain at least one major point of public access to all major water bodies. That is a state requirement. And then the second big goal here is to work with partners to protect important outdoor and natural areas for future generations. And this is the objective that I was just getting at. So create a recreation and open space plan that identifies first priority sites that may be appropriate for recreation or conservation uses or trail network connectivity, and having a clearly defined evaluation process. That's the more the more in-depth planning that we're recommending. And then it should also include strategies to preserve land, including funding sources and identification of how the land will be managed in the future. So whether it should be used for conservation or recreation purposes, or both. And then transportation, really the big priority goal here is to make transportation improvements, especially active transportation, that incentivize walking, biking, and public transit and have the effect of reducing vehicle traffic. So really the objectives here are increasing sustainable mobility and decreasing vehicle miles traveled by investing in public transit and active transportation. Really, at our meetings that we had one specific to active transportation, and folks in the room all agreed that we sort of split folks into 6 or 8 different tables. And each table came to the conclusion that ultimately implementing the Route 2 corridor plan as developed by Sebago is the biggest bang for your buck in terms of active transportation improvements. And that was what folks wanted to see prioritized. And then adopting complete streets and Vision Zero policies. Complete streets policy is a policy that the council and Public Works will consider, at least, creating streets that have, for example, bicycle lanes, sidewalks, etc. And if they don't implement with those amenities, actively explaining to the community why those amenities weren't implemented is part of that process. So cost can be a factor, but it's sort of the explanation. And then Vision Zero is just envisioning zero traffic related deaths in the community through this kind of investment. We also heard over and over that ultimately a lot of the desires of the community requires either at least maintaining our current level of service. And in some cases, like related to code enforcement, it is increasing our level of service. And so the biggest priority goal here is adequately fund the capital improvement plan and carefully consider operational budget requests to continue providing that exemplary public service at the level that the community has come to expect. There are some objectives related to that. So identifying public service needs and developing efficient, actionable strategies to meet them, prioritizing the provision of public facilities and services that promote and support development in the identified growth areas that I'll talk about. Generally exploring options for the regional delivery of services, exploring grant options, and then supporting the level of financial commitment necessary to provide needed infrastructure in designated growth areas consistent with the community's vision. That sort of tees up the next piece where I'll talk a little bit more about growth areas versus rural areas. So the
Can we pause and see if anybody has any questions for you before we move on to the next
Sure.
piece?
Yeah.
Any questions from counselors?
I have some. And please do let me know if it's helpful to hold some of these for later, but there's a lot of slides going by fast and some of them are just clarifying. So all the way back to the beginning where you had information about the community values, did that values list make it into this report somewhere? Because I didn't see it when I read through until I saw it on a screen just now. I could easily have missed it, but where would I find that values list?
Ultimately, the community values are were directly distilled into the goals and vision statement. So I don't know that off the top of my head, if that made it into the plan as sort of written that way. But what we attempted to do was distill those down. And then as we were looking at the vision statement and priority goals, that was the list that the committee itself kept coming back to.
Got it. Is it possible to go back to the housing slide for a minute? I think I had a question on that one.
Sure.
On this one, where we're talking about a goal of 10% of all new residential development being subsidized or regulated senior affordable, and also quite a lot of focus on this sort of missing middle housing. I know some of these details will come later, but I guess I'm just curious to know. I think it would be lovely to think that it's going to be easy to create. And just from the little bit of time on council, it seems that I've heard that getting developers to build smaller middle level housing is sometimes hard. Will we hear more as this plan comes on about how to actually really incentivize that strongly enough to make it happen?
Yeah, I think with regard to housing in particular, this is sort of my planning area of specialty. So I went maybe well, I think I went just enough in the action steps in the implementation matrix under housing. I think, especially with that area, if you printed that out and sort of treated it as a checklist of things that you wanted to implement as a council and as a community, that starts to get you to that number. There's a lot in there with both incentives and regulation, both working together in that implementation matrix for housing.
Great. And my third one right now is when you were showing us the vision statement, I'm remembering that in the documents we were sent, there was sort of a second page of that vision statement with some bullet points. Are we going to look at that together at some point coming up?
Yeah, the bullet points are actually the priority goals that I've shared.
The community vision bullet points?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so we'll get to
the-
those because I had some questions on that.
So we've already discussed those. Those are these big ideas that I've been sort of floating through. So everything in red on these slides is the
Okay.
bullet points from that.
Okay. So if I have a question on those bullet points, do you want me to hold that then for later? Or where do you want
I'm
that?
happy to take that now. Yep.
So in the actual comp plan, I'm looking at the community vision page, which is 23, which seems to start with the same kind of general vision statement and then follow with some statements about over the next 10 years. I was wondering a bit about what's listed here and what's not listed here on the economic development category. So the slide you have up there right now. I I noticed the only bullet point that I saw on here, it didn't feel to me like it fully captured what's on this slide right here and kind of in the notes elsewhere. So I guess I just wanted to highlight that, the one that says seek to grow the year-round population and workforce in order to allow for diversity of businesses, and then goes on to say to enhance feet on the street. So the feet on the street part seems to be captured really well. But throughout the notes in your document, there were lots of comments from the public about sort of improving facades and filling vacant buildings and dealing with sort of visual appeal of the downtown area. Talked about green space. On one of your word clouds, the second biggest term was green space in the downtown. So I feel like nothing seems to have made it on here that to me captures that. So I didn't know if it was possible to look at that bullet point and think about how to flesh that out a little more to get some of these other ideas that are on these other slides somehow in here. It just felt like the only piece to me that felt missing when I read these bullet points. Everything else seemed to very accurately capture all the details in these other slides. And that one seemed to me to be missing a chunk. So I guess I just wanted to ask, is that possible to bring in some of those points a little more and flesh out? This is the only one I think that has one bullet point either. So I didn't know if that's the kind of comment we're looking for tonight from us, or is that helpful? Or again, the terms I saw in the other slides were about filling vacant storefronts, incentivizing that, looking at facades and the visual appeal of downtown, and a lot about green space and community gathering in the downtown. So if there's a way to work some of that in, I feel like some pieces are missing on that.
Okay.
So I think,
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have, when we get to the end of the presentation today, and Leo has a question before we move on, but I think when we get to the end of the presentation, moving to Q&A.
Yep.
I looked to Mitch and Clint for this, but have a conversation about how council feedback, this is this was unanimously shared by the Comprehensive Planning Committee. It's their plan that they, worked with the community to develop. So we'll have to talk.
100%.
We'll be able to make, I noticed there's no international airport in here, right? So we'll have to be able to make those kinds of changes. Kidding, of course,
Right.
is always about the airport thing, but we'll be able to make some suggestions and offerings before we finalize it.
Yeah,
So we'll talk
100%.
at the end of this meeting about how we move forward with those kinds of ideas, to the extent that, we may want to prove it. Whatever, I'm sure we'll have opportunities to offer some suggestions. So Leo, you had a question?
No, I got just one quick one. I did see that Page Place was turning into a runway, but maybe you didn't read that deep
Perfect,
into it. Okay.
perfect. It's just long enough for medium-sized aircraft.
Just regarding that missing middle, and it makes sense hearing you say that that's kind of your specialty, because I did appreciate reading in there the idea, but I don't know how this plays out, and that's kind of my question. Talked about adjusting various neighborhoods to be consistent with what's in those neighborhoods now, and that's I don't know if that's code or just standards or what that is. I really like that prescription, if you will, and I'm curious how that, I mean, obviously there's so much in here that, we're not checking down through the list and hitting everything off, but I do think that one to me jumped out as something I would love, I think is important to see, addressing that missing middle in this town. So can you just maybe help me understand, is that something that would have to be a code change down the road or something like that?
Yeah, I'll talk about this a little bit more in just a second too, but ultimately it would end up being a zoning amendment. And I do
Zoning
want to be
amendment.
clear that we did some analysis around non-conforming properties, specifically in the MDR zoning district. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and show a map. So it's sort of the Brown Sailor development area, some of these other yellow in-town neighborhoods, and then the Webster side more particularly, that there is a significant amount of non-conforming properties with regard to both minimum lot area and frontage requirements. And so ultimately what we're proposing is to sort of match what the actual development pattern is and not make those properties non-conforming anymore with our code, which is the existing condition. So
Yeah,
zoning
and
amendment.
I like I said, I really appreciate seeing that, and I think that's a super interesting and smart thing to do. Just because everyone's not looking for a McMansion, obviously, and I think it's good that it fits within these different you know, the rest of the house around him. So I really appreciate that sentiment and hope that that is something that does come forward. So thanks.
Okay. Any more questions before we move on? Take it away.
All
Isabel.
right, so I'm gonna go back a couple slides. Yeah, so I just gave you a insight into the future land use map, but what you're seeing on that map is a significant amount of green area, and that is the rural area. But then the remaining colorful areas are growth areas, and the state has some growth area guidelines. So they require that you establish a growth area that is located in or adjacent to already populated areas, well served by public services, you know, public sewer and water, and interconnected roads and sidewalks. So you want to be able to walk within the growth area. It's near existing fire and police stations to minimize emergency response times. It's preferably located near schools and existing jobs, and it's proactively planned to accommodate a wide range of different land uses in compact, efficient development patterns, such as mixed uses. That is directly from the state's language. Rural area guidelines is really any area that's outside of the growth area is a rural area. It tends to have less infrastructure, so no sidewalks, no public water. It's usually driving distance from amenities, but it still deserves some level of coordination and planning to mitigate impacts, because this area might also be areas where there's significant habitat. So what we've come up with is this map that's included in the future land use section of this plan. The dark green areas are critical natural areas. Those are habitat areas. Those are worthy of conservation, more than likely. Many of them in this white hatched area near the top are actually already conserved by the land trust or our town-owned property. But there are some others that may be worthy of conservation. And then everything in the light green, everything else is rural. And then these areas here, I'm going to talk about well, I just sort of referenced in a little bit more detail. They have some specific vision statements that I would encourage you to look at, because we've had some significant feedback from folks on each of those visions for development within the growth area. And the one that I want to mainly plug for your attention, because we already sort of talked about the neighborhoods, is there's some specific things with regard to downtown. And to answer a question that just came up, that's really where I took the opportunity to talk a lot about beautification efforts and facade, and also on some level expanding the land uses that are allowed in downtown, and making sure that we are doing that throughout our historic district, which is essentially Main Street outside of your window. And then the other thing I just want to talk about and just plug for your attention is the Orono West, which is this sort of creamsicle light orange color. This is not currently in our designated growth area. Everything else essentially follows the existing 2014's plans recommendations for growth areas. Orono West was added with the recognition that these are significant properties that are mainly all owned by one landowner, and that there's opportunity for some pretty interesting mixed-use residential development out there, located adjacent to the highway, very accessible to things, and also that's sort of the next natural step for if we're going to expand infrastructure. So I would encourage you to take a look at those land use sections in the future land use chapter more specifically. I sort of broke them down by page, but I wanted to call those ones out specifically since it's a little bit of a change. And I'm happy to go through that in more detail if you'd like. And then just with regard to implementation, I want to give a plug that I already sort of mentioned this with regard to recreation, somewhat to economic development, but the comprehensive plan is a start. I recognize that we could not get through, you know, every data point, everything that we would have wanted to dive into deeply within this plan. So we've recommended other plans and studies where that's warranted. And then in turn, the comprehensive plan in conjunction with those plans and studies ends up impacting town ordinances. And then finally, those ordinances end up impacting other policies and programming decisions. So I think you're all generally aware at this point that the more difficult to interpret your ordinances are, the more robust your ordinances are in some cases, the more staff you need to assist people through that process, the more code enforcement you might need, et cetera. That's just one example. I think that there are other examples where that might dictate, other considerations. So just want to put that on your radar as well. And then just for the public watching, for their benefit, this is a link to view the comprehensive plan. All of the links that I sent you in your packet are also on this page. And we have it broken down by, you can view the full plan document, but then also the actual chapter by chapter data analysis that was done as well. And that was fairly robust. So that's all I have to share at this point. I'm happy to go through anything in more detail if there are still outstanding questions.
Anything specific for Isabel before we start talking about kind of our process?
Any questions about the plan at all?
Yeah, I mean, we got you until 7, right? I mean, it's kind of,
All right, I got some.
Yeah.
It's a follow-up to Leo's comment. I also really appreciated seeing that we were working to bring the zoning regulations or lot size regulations sort of into alignment with what actually exists in neighborhoods. But looking at that, I was a little bit puzzled why we weren't just bringing them to a lower level in all of the neighborhoods. So I'm certainly aware, I live in Webster, that there's a lot of lots that are probably smaller than what the zoning says. And I saw that that was also true in, what was the other neighborhood you highlighted?
Sailor development.
Right, in Sailor development. But Leo, you could speak to this more than me, but I'm assuming that's also true down in the Tough End and down on Mill Street and down on the Basin. It seems to me it's true everywhere. And when I looked at the recommendations in this comp plan, I saw 8,000 square feet in Webster, 9,000 in Sailor, and then 10,000 for Mill Street in the Basin. And to me, that just didn't make a lot of sense. I wondered why we're not just going to 8,000 everywhere, since there are 8,000 feet lots everywhere across town. So I wondered if you could speak to that. I guess I think I'd like to see it consistently the same across town so that we're encouraging, that kind of infill growth everywhere where neighborhoods already have some of that anyway. But there might be a reason that I'm totally unaware of. So I want to toss that to you. If you could talk to us about why different limits in different neighborhoods.
Yeah, so the one sort of wrinkle in this whole thing is that there's also been recently a state law passed as we were going through this comprehensive plan update. In about June, maybe the governor signed it. And it actually lowers the minimum lot area for all lots across the state of Maine, down to, well, there's some nuances, but in the growth areas that are on sewer and water, it's actually down to 5,000 square feet, which is a fairly significant change in certain areas of Orono. Because I think, to your point, there are certain areas where that lot size sort of is already happening and makes more sense. But the recommendation in the future land use section for other in-town neighborhoods is actually just to align with state law ultimately, that was passed as we were developing this plan.
So then that would mean 5,000 for every neighborhood, or what would that mean?
Not necessarily. So in the growth area, if you're on sewer and water, 5,000 is the new maximum minimum lot size, if that makes sense. The new minimum lot size prescribed by state law. And then if you're in the growth area but not on sewer and water, there's a higher minimum lot size there. And then if you're in the rural areas, you're sort of not as impacted by this. You're still impacted slightly, but not to that level. It's consistent with existing state law.
So would this plan, before it goes out, be adapted to say 5,000 then for the Webster and Sailor and everywhere else across town, as opposed to the numbers that are in here now?
What we recommended was simply following state law as it changes, with the recognition that there's likely to be other state law changes through the lifetime of this plan. That was sort of where we netted out as a committee.
I just think it would be great to change the language a little bit in here, because otherwise it's confusing, and it does read like it's 8,000 in Webster and 9,000 in Sailor. And so wherever you
Okay.
can address that, that would be great. Thanks.
Sure.
All right, well, we got to decide just too whether what we ask for changes and identify, I mean, well, yeah, okay, there'll be things that are going to be clarifications and things like that in terms of how the report's presented. And then to the extent that we're going to ask for changes to the plan before we approve it, I think we have to catalog those and have council direction on those things. So,
Yeah, and just as an aside, we have another public hearing. This is the public hearing that's happening on Wednesday is actually the only state required public engagement piece of this entire process, although clearly we've done some more significant public engagement. So on Wednesday, we'll be having another public hearing, and then any changes that you all direct this evening, and any changes as a result of that public hearing, the committee will likely need to meet to discuss further. And then those will be incorporated before this comes back to council. So for what that's worth.
and then will we have to have a council hearing on this, or is this hearing the only public hearing we're going to have?
The council will also need to follow their typical adoption process for ordinances, which would also include a
Yep.
public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the public hearing Wednesday is it at 6 o'clock? What time is it?
6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay. Will you be giving the same or similar presentation to what you gave tonight?
It will be almost the exact same presentation. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anybody have any further questions? Rob?
I don't have any further questions. Just thank you again for all of your work on this. I mean, this is really impressive, everything you've done. And as you pointed out, only the hearing this coming Wednesday was actually required. So, I mean, I really appreciate you being responsive to the community and making sure that there were so many people involved that could be heard in the development of this. It really feels like it was a community effort. So thank you.
All right. Oh, sure. Please do.
Isabel, I have a question of some things I wanted to understand a little better on pages 43 to 45 of these. I guess it's also on these printed out pages, but on the online version, it's pages 43 to 45. It referenced some things that I don't necessarily know what they mean, and I figured they're probably things you could quickly define and explain. One thing it mentioned, something about a housing trust fund, like creating a housing trust fund, and I don't know what that means. And there was some discussion about backlot development, which I could guess might mean developing the back half of a lot that doesn't necessarily have street front, but that could be completely wrong. It's my guessing. So I guess I was wondering if you could speak a little to what a housing trust fund is and what backlot development means on some of those recommendations.
Your interpretation of backlot development is exactly right. It's just sort of there are many lots within Orono that have, that sort of are, go back further than they have frontage along the street. And so it's just allowing that backlot that otherwise would be able to be, carved off because it doesn't meet frontage requirements to meet those through a driveway or an easement, something along those lines. Housing trust fund is, something that I worked on significantly in other communities, especially because, as you're all aware, the state legislature right now is very interested in housing development. There's sort of money available for significant housing grants and things like that. So what communities do, there's a South Portland example cited in the implementation matrix that I worked on. Portland has one, Damariscotta has one, a couple of other smaller towns near or in your region have them as well. It's sort of a financial incentive, a grant program that the council or sometimes an affordable housing committee runs, and they are able to make grants or sometimes matching loans to housing developers that are creating housing specific to what the community wants to see. And ultimately that can be flexible based on year to year. Portland's changes theirs year to year based on what the data is saying that they need most in their community for that year.
So this kind of addresses the question I asked earlier about how do we incentivize enough to get this missing middle housing that we want? Since what I'm reading in the national news anyway is that it's a difficult thing to get developers sometimes to take on. So this is one of those kind of incentive programs we could create that might help with that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And on page 43, the page previously, I was a little bit curious about, I saw there was one of the possible, I'm going to get my term wrong here, if it's an objective or a goal or an action, but whichever one it is, there was something about funding some kind of archaeological survey to actually survey what we have for prehistoric and historic sites of value in town. And I noticed that that was rated as a medium level as opposed to some other things regarding historic buildings and archaeology being rated high. I was a little curious why that comes lower on the priority list. It didn't look like a high cost item from the dollar symbols over to the right. I don't know, I just was curious because it seems like it's hard to figure out how to preserve things if we don't actually first know what they are. So if you could speak to that, is there a reason we're not doing that sooner in the process?
Ultimately, it came down to what was higher priority for the committee. And so this one was something that was specifically recommended by the State Historic Preservation Office, wasn't necessarily a locally driven action step. And we rated it slightly lower as an action step. So again, sort of flexible there, but that was ultimately, it just came down to there was many things that we rated as high. And so we had to start choosing things that were rated as medium or low.
This might be more a question for Clint, but I've been wondering how that will relate to the fact that we have a interpretive plan coming back from McQuaid Museum Solutions that I'm just curious. I want us to have the flexibility if they're saying there might be sites and we need to identify where they are that, we can move on that.
I'm curious, the plan may actually just ask us to do more studies. So it might be, they might actually reinforce each other, but there might be some they identify. And I think that just puts us further ahead. Yep.
Okay. Any more questions about the plan or presentation? And I would like to have a bit of a conversation about our next steps. Just so
Just if you're going to move on, I want to thank Isabel as well. She's done an amazing job.
Okay.
And I would like to point out the counselors as you're going through, I've kind of, this has been a great process, participated in quite a few of the meetings as well. In the earlier pages, the late, page 28 in that area, you'll see some renderings that we took from Sebago that were kind of modeling some conversations, not only Route 2, but all the comments about bike ped. Those are just renderings. Give a picture. Sometimes, the comment of picture's worth 1,000 words. You'll also see like on pages 34 and 37, we did to show some things, Dunstan Crossings, a project in Southern Maine that I went and looked at per Isabel's suggestions, as well as, I think page 37 gives some ideas of types of housing construction. Those aren't in Orono. Those are ideas of how people might want to go about them. But we thought it'd help people understand when we refer to some of those, to see what it is, are some of the concepts of where it could go. Okay. But
Great.
that, Isabel, thank you.
Oh, hold on, Isabel. We got one more.
I really took this seriously, my homework. Sorry, I read in a lot of detail. I just wanted, first I wanted to say
You
also.
still there?
Is she there?
I think she might have dropped off because I know that she had another meeting. But what she did say to me is if you had questions or she was going to go back and watch the recording and would be able to answer any questions that came up for you folks. So as you discuss it, bring those questions up and she will make sure that she gets back with any answers that you have.
Okay. You want to ask it now? Just put it in the thing, or do you want to?
Well, either way, I mean, one was just, I really liked the part of the plan. So are we going to talk about, are we having a conversation now amongst ourselves about parts we especially loved and anything we wanted to see amplified, or what are we doing now, Dan? Because I can do it either way.
I think, well, we got a public hearing on Wednesday and then we have a public hearing before us. So it may be premature for us to get out ahead of some of that stuff if you want to, but.
I really just want to say that I especially liked the recreation and open space plan. I thought it was really nice to think about having that in a comprehensive plan. I've sort of been missing that. So I really valued that part of the report a lot. And I guess the other thing, I just wanted to cycle back to the first comment that I made, which is on page 23 with the community vision and the bullet points. When we look at the part that says over the next 10 years, and it bullet points things we will do over the next 10 years. When you get to the fourth dot, there's no numbers, but the fourth dot, the one that says seek to grow our year-round population and workforce, and goes on to say enhancing feet on the street. I just wanted to highlight, Dan, I'm not asking for the committee to put in anything that they don't think needs to be there. I'm just pointing out that on a multitude of pages that are not this page, they say a lot more about the downtown business section. And I didn't feel like this one bullet point captured what they were saying elsewhere, not what I'm saying. So I'm just going to highlight out that on page 12, page 18, and page 28, they give a lot more details about that. And I'd love to see a little bit more of those details make it in here to really capture the feeling of the whole report. And in particular, this currently reads to me like the major goal is just population and workforce, and that somehow that is going to enhance feet on the street. And I don't think that's what they mean. The comma makes me think they wanted it to be a separate idea, but it doesn't really read that way. It kind of reads as if we do that and there's more diversity of businesses, that will instantly do feet on the street. And the rest of the report doesn't say that. It gives all these ideas of how to create feet on the street by residential development being integrated in and other things Isabel talked about. So I just would encourage maybe looking at those other pages and seeing if that part could be beefed up a little. Every other part of this page felt to me like it exactly captured all the other slides that Isabel's taken us through. So just wanted to highlight that in case they're
Sure.
going to look at it again.
Okay. I'd like to talk a little bit about process and where we go from here and how we get, and just as a discussion. So we've got the public hearing on Wednesday. Coming back from that, there could be modifications to the plan based on the public hearing, and that'll be at the comprehensive committee's discretion. They still own this. They say they own this document until when, right? And when does it go from ownership of the comprehensive
I
planning
admit
committee?
that, but I would be my understanding. I think that this is becoming your document quickly.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So what I think kind of would come out of this meeting and the public hearing is any comments that you have. And what's going to happen is once in that public hearing and in this meeting, those comments will then come back to the comprehensive plan committee. They'll review them to see how they may or whether they feel like they need to be integrated into the plan and made changes of what's there right now. Once that's completed, then that document would come through your process.
Yeah.
Okay. And at that point, as you go through that process and you're hearing what, people are saying. So I would encourage you that if there are things that you think are missing or that need to be added, I think you need to bring that up so that they can be incorporated into that conversation.
So it feels like, just to maybe paraphrase what you said, if as one community member or as one counselor, you have something you'd like to emphasize, now's your time. But once we have the council's public hearing, then you're going to have to get a majority. Well, we're going to approve it through our regular process. But at what point does it become, when we make decisions as a whole, we have to vote on it. And at some point, I guess I got my head thinking this is like an ordinance or something where we have to like amend it. That's pain in the neck stuff when we have to amend things and, vote on it and wordsmith it up here on the fly, make the sausage. I mean, it feels like if you've got, like, Sarah's got some great points. So it feels like we still got opportunities as individual community members to attend the public hearing, as individual counselors to reach out to Isabel with suggestions that'll shape what comes back. And then once we have a public hearing on a document, at what point, I mean, if I've got a word I want to change on page 39, I mean, at what point, you know what I mean? I hope it's not that, but if there is, I don't want to have to vote. If what point is it that we're voting on? We're going to vote up or down on this thing at some point.
So
as it's prepared for us, as it's presented to us.
Well, you also have to remember, once you vote and approve it, it's got to go to the state of Maine. You're not done. You
Yeah.
don't make the law, you adopt it.
Yeah.
Set it as what you want. You'll send it off to them
And-
and then it'll come back from them one last time.
And
Typically saying complete or incomplete and what the issues may be.
Okay.
I would say from what I'm seeing is there's not going to be many issues. She's done an amazing job. What happens more is when communities tend to go off track. So like a state goal and say, no, we're not doing it. Yeah, they'll come back and say, no, you got to have it.
And,
That's what you
and
gotta
even
do.
at that point, once it's approved, it's still a guide. It's not a, step by step. Here's what you're going to do, correct?
So I think she said it better than we will. It sets some goals and values that lead to different things that you can do. The overarching goal. So when you see, I'm going to look on that front page, Orono is a diverse, multi-generational community that enables older adults to age in place while expanding accessible housing and community amenities that attract and attain younger families and professionals. You just can't do anything inconsistent with that.
Yeah.
You couldn't come in here and say, we're banning all, so that's what she's getting at. You have a lot of room
Leeway.
to work within those goals. The other piece you got to remember is that you have to have a comp plan in order to have land use. That's a main state law. That's what gets you having a zoning map.
Yeah.
So towns that have zoning maps and land use have to have a comp plan and have to keep it up to date. So those are the two big criteria why they're
Right.
there. But no, you're not prevented from, you designated the growth zone, and 6 years from now, we realize that we've outgrown the growth area and there's a new property that needs to be moved into it. You can expand your water and sewer out into that area and make it growth zone.
So
It's not preventing that.
Can I get one
go ahead.
question? So one of the comments made were that the comp plan committee recommends doing the Sebago techniques
Route two
plan,
thing?
Route 2
Yep.
plan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there is not a plan for Route 2. That we've saw some early discussions and maybe that, aren't we paying 400,000 or 3 million? I don't know what isn't that often design right now? Because I don't think we've seen the actual plan. So it just struck me that they're recommending this plan that's not in existence to some degree.
Nothing finalized. Again, I think the difference is having a plan versus construction documents. Right now, we've put a vision together of what Route 2 could or should, but it's not
Yeah, there were.
based upon actual road widths. So again, it's a plan. It's still a concept, an idea, a thought of what you think it could or should look like. But you still have to go put the pieces together and make a document that is the written actual plan of what you will implement. We don't have that last step
No,
yet.
there were 5 rotaries or 6 rotaries, and I don't think we have. That's why it seems a little odd that it's recommending that plan because there is no plan.
Just to be clear, I don't think they recommended that plan. I think they recommended that would be the biggest bang for the buck. Meaning if you were going to invest in something like what they were doing, they were talking about that would be the best bang for your buck, not necessarily any other thing. And it is based on a plan, Leo. I mean, that was something that was created and you guys moved forward to the next step. So there is an actual document there, not that it's all going to happen, but
Right. It's nowhere. I don't think it's from my remembering what we talked about. It was like, yeah, we're going to move forward with this. These are just some renderings. These are some ideas. It was in my view, it was far from a plan. We didn't have any details.
It was based upon a year-long community process that the Maine Department of Transportation has, and we have, and they're doing a $3 million project on this part of the town. They are not starting blindly with no idea of what this should be. They started with that concept. They're now trying to design what can fit in it for real. That will come back to us and we'll see it. But they've got a starting point. They got a vision that this community weighed in and gave a lot of input on that got to the best final product we could. So it now shows a vision of what we think could happen out there. But now it's up to engineers, funding, and councils to adopt what we will or won't implement out of that.
Okay.
We did approve design funds, right, from the town too? Like, was it 300,000? 10% of the, yeah.
But we haven't, they don't need it yet.
right.
Right.
So good, I mean, I wish they did, but they
Yep,
don't.
they don't need it yet.
They don't-
Yes,
yeah.
it's there. Yep.
But like one area that I'd point out, like, so I guess the point about these being goals that Leo made is true. And I guess I don't have to, we aren't putting these in the code of ordinances. And we're not committing a budget dollar to any of these things. As we vote to approve this plan, we're not locking in that, so there's pieces like the safety piece on housing where I recall that one in particular where it's under the housing topics, the second to last one on it talks about adequately fund based on level of service desired, the code enforcement department and life safety positions in the fire department to ensure that Orono's housing units are regularly reviewed for compliance with safety standards. So that's kind of, you could go to the city of Portland, I think, has an annual review process of every housing unit in Portland, and they have to fund it. I think that's how they do it. I remember that being a topic of discussion where they had a huge fire several years ago, and the work that came out of that in response to that. And we obviously don't have that in Orono, where we go into every unit every year, and we don't have the resources to do it. It would be very expensive. So it's kind of, there'd be a lot of room to set the actual policy based on that recommendation, and still align with it. So the council and the community will have a lot more to say about what we do in that. And that's just one example of all of these different examples. So
One of the comments I would just make in general is through this process, the comp plan committee went through the old comp plan and asked whether things that were in there that weren't implemented or didn't happen should still be in the plan. And if they shouldn't, they took them out. So, and there were things that didn't happen in the last comp plan because there were suggestions and for whatever times changed, this wasn't an important thing or it changed, the vision changed for things. So like anything, it's a guide in order to keep you moving with a vision statement and some overarching actions or overarching kind of ways for us to look at our community that we're going to follow in general, but not because they said we're going to do this, you have to do it and it's going to happen. And all that's got to be prioritized based on time, cost, and priority of when we want to get these things done.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a guide.
yeah, so Congress creates a budget, but
Yeah.
then they have to appropriate the money, and that's kind of a different, so.
Can you, on that note, because I didn't know how to read that. There's a score of 7.3. Do you feel that Orono is at a total reset point, or do you feel that it should be a time?
I know
On
where
the
you are.
summary on page 18, it's what he was just, I think Mitch was just talking about, but I didn't have any idea what that 7.3 means.
It's, Leo, it's a score, right? So they scored one end of the spectrum would have meant it's a total reset, and the other end would have meant the existing plan just has to be continued. And it was asked of the community, not the comp plan committee. It was at that open meeting that
Yeah.
Clint hosted with 40 community
Yeah,
members.
that was
So that was community members. I think Clint can speak to it, but
correct. And that was quite an interesting conversation because it was happening in the committee levels. Because there was confusion about what a complete reset meant to the point where, oh, we're throwing everything away and we're going to start over. That's not what a complete reset really meant. What they really went to is that they were very influenced by the history of what Orono's done, but they also wanted to be a vision. They took it as a statement to be a visionary and lead forward. So when you look at the page 23 document that Sarah was just talking about with those, that was a lot of work. I saw multiple meetings where that was redone again. There was some language from the past, but after that January meeting, that's where the committee really went back in and did a lot of soul searching, I guess, if you will, on what that should or shouldn't say. But yeah, the idea of the 7.3, that was just the number that came out. If you were there, we did a lot of scale this 1 to 10 and they put them all together and it came out and said you're 7.3. So that was
So it's-
1 was do nothing, leave it right as it is. 10 was like throw it away and start over. They came in at a 7.3.
Oh, 10, I was thinking it was
think
the
it was that
opposite.
way, wasn't
The
it?
opposite of that.
Remember.
I think it's a reverse,
That's the way
Clint.
it was.
I think it's listed as a reverse on the document here.
Was it?
Take a look at 18, but it's page 18, right, Leo?
Yeah.
I think it
Don't
says
memory.
total reset would have been a 1
Yeah.
and leave it the way it is would have been a 10 is what it says on the bottom of the graph.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that clarifying.
We-
I couldn't make sense of that number, so.
Matt, do you have anything? Are you still with us? Do you have anything?
Yeah, I just had one. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
All right. Let me turn this. Can you see me? No, it's all right. I just had one question. Like, in terms of practicality, how much of the last comprehensive plan do you think was kind of executed? And then also, as we went forward, I always heard about the comprehensive plan as we kind of worked through budgets and stuff for the last few years that I've been on the council, but it wasn't something kind of like front and center to the council. Is this something that should be, or is this more of like a guideline for the staff of the town to make sure that we're fulfilling, state requirements? I'm just curious as to how this vision, I love it. I think it's really cool. I think it's important, but I just wonder, like in practicality as counselors, is this something that we should be bringing up at budget or in going into the
Matt,
future?
yeah, let's talk about that second
Okay.
piece in a second. But Mitch, do you want to give a overview of how much you think of the 2014 plan was implemented? Did we make it was pretty successful in the
Yeah.
beginning, right? I mean, it made a lot of progress
Yeah. I think a large portion of it was,
Yep.
and in some way, shape or form. I think it's always hard to do that because like I
Yeah.
said, priorities change. The world changes around you pretty quickly, with things. And so, I think at the end of the day, we did a significant portion of that, especially early on. We tried to fix some things towards the end, but ultimately I think we addressed the things that were in front of us that the community felt were important at the time, that we felt continued to be important through the process of 10 years.
Yeah, I
That-
bet
that
there's
makes
a
a
bit
lot
of
of
a half.
sense.
Yeah, yeah.
That makes a lot
I
of
bet there's a
sense.
bit of a. Go ahead. All right, sorry.
I have a follow-up on Matt's thing, which when I came on council pretty early on, I did ask staff where to find a document that would track what had been done on the comprehensive plan and was told, oh, we have that. And it was great when I got it, but it wasn't very easily visible and accessible to the public. So I do feel like one thing we could do as a council is not just think about how often do we check in with this document, which I think should be a good bit more often than we have been in my tenure, you know, whether it's quarterly or every 6 months or whatever it is, some check-in on which items have had significant progress on them. I'd like to get that report as a council, but I'd also like, you know, just the checklist document to be public facing and visible, like this thing completed, sort of like Clint's work plan has like 25% done, 100% done on that one. Because I think it holds us as a council accountable for moving things forward and allows the rest of the public to sort of see all and celebrate all the things that staff is moving forward all the time. Because when I asked for that document, I went, wow, look at how much stuff has already been done. But without seeing it, I had no idea. And I'm imagining most people in the community also won't have any idea without something that's, you know, a clickable link where you can see how much it's moving forward.
I think to that end, I think we'll have as we're gonna go through as we've got an election coming up in the start of a new municipal year, and today we were mapping out sort of the steps we have to take to constitute the next council in the next municipal year and the goal setting and planning that we're going to do. And I think as part of that discussion, we need to layer in how we develop allegiance or alignment with the comprehensive plan in our goal setting and our work. So that'll be a discussion that we have to have as a group as well in terms of moving this forward. So
I would say off the top though, I don't think I don't believe, and I know that's not what the people that worked on it are thinking, but I don't think that is the intent of this thing. And I think that is one of those, I mean, we're doing it more with our goals and whatnot, and we are elected here. I mean, most of this whole thing, it wasn't done by elected, so ultimately it has to filter through us. So I mean, I guess
Yeah.
if you work it into what we're doing, that would make more sense. But I hate to think that we're going to make this a tracking document for staff of, okay, where are we at? What percentage?
Leo, it was already being done. It was no ask for staff. They already had it. It just wasn't visible to anyone. And so it was no work. When I asked for it, staff handed it to me ready, done. They were like, here it is. We track it all the time. So
Okay.
maybe that's no longer the case. But when I asked a few years ago, it was already fully done and ready and waiting. It just wasn't something that anyone could easily see. I think it's good because we may then be accountable for why we haven't moved forward a certain goal as a council. We've decided that one wasn't important. I just want that kind of accountability as a council for what things we're choosing.
I see the accountability as opportunities for people to come forward with energy and, you know, to behind the things, you know, don't blame me for all the stuff that didn't get done, but, you know, or us, you know, but it's hard. But yeah, I know what you mean when you talk about accountability, and I think it's a good thing. All right.
But like I said, it was mostly good accountability. It was mostly me going, wahoo, they did all of it. I just didn't know. I mean, not all, but really a huge amount of it was done and I didn't know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you say accountability, I hear credit. So we'll get, you know, we'll kind of
Oh.
a good team, right? We'll take, you hold us accountable and I'll make sure we get credit and we'll work it out from there. Yeah. Rob?
I know we don't necessarily do public comment period and workshops, but we have somebody, if you had any desire to speak, to say anything.
No, do
If
you want
you
to come
want-
up and yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Rob.
just want to make sure we didn't.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a little bit shorter. Hold on. Hi, I'm Lincoln Tyner. I study history over at the University of Maine.
What was your
This is
first name? I'm sorry.
Lincoln.
Lincoln.
Yeah. Like the president, but actually not named after him. I've had a lot of jokes about it before. Been called Honest Abe. I cannot grow facial hair for that, so don't even try there. But yeah, my name's Lincoln. I'm a disabled vet. I study over at the University of Maine, and don't want to take up a lot of you guys' time. But I wanted to let y'all know it's actually interesting that you brought up historic preservation and things because I study history over there, and they're actually planning with their space committee right now to destroy the oldest building on campus that was built in 1833 to build it into a parking lot. And it's only going to gain them about 50 to 70 spaces. And me, students, community members, and alumni that I've spoken to, we've started a petition about this that has over 1,000 signatures now, where we've been speaking with the governing body over there, and they're not exactly responsive about our concerns. The reason that I'm here tonight to speak with you all is not only is there obviously a historic loss, but this building is actually the only surviving building from the original deed that your governing body actually gave to the Board of Trustees back in 1866. So it's the only one that survived. The other one burned down in 1933. That's what happens when you build things with wood, and things are typically flammable. I can make that joke because I grew up in a farmhouse and a lot of things caught fire. But what I'm trying to get across tonight is that there's a really important historical building under threat right now, and a lot of the information that they've been sending out, we've been able to take apart piece by piece, and it is actually, unfortunately, a lot of spread of misinformation about this building itself. I have like an 88-page presentation that I could share with you. I have a 50-something page historical report on this building that I could share. I will not bore you with that tonight. I also actually have to go over to the Hampton Historical Society and share this information as well. But I would love to share this information with you because myself, community members, students, and alumni, we're all very concerned about this building. It also happens to be the home of the Franco-American Center, and they're being relegated now to the southernmost tip of campus in a decommissioned building called Libby Hall, and then they're being rehomed again into the Environmental Sciences Laboratory, which is currently the home of the Spruce Budworm Research Lab, which I don't know if y'all know anything about spruce budworm. I've learned a lot about it in the past like month or so. My brother's the STEM guy. I'm the humanities guy. We kind of came together to help out with that support for the family. But so I've learned a lot about this thing, and it's actually the most devastating species for North American forests. So they do a lot of like wicked critical research. Very fascinating lab. Great folks over there. They really should not be getting moved. They've invested hundreds of thousands, probably closer to millions of dollars of our money into this building to be renovated specifically for their needs. And now they're going to gut it again to make it the Franco-American Center. So a lot of this, if I understand if there's not a concern about the cultural aspect, but a lot of this is also fiscal irresponsibility of the university saying that we're a sustainable university and then wasting taxpayer money again and again, renovating these buildings and then tearing them down, because Libby Hall is also going to be invested in and then torn down right afterwards. So it's a lot of frustrations from, I've spoken to everybody from frat boys to octogenarians in our community, and everybody is coming together on this saying that it's a ridiculous plan, and that if you actually look at the overviews of what they're going to do for it, it's not even benefiting really our community a lot on campus. And there are parking issues. Please don't get me wrong. Trust me, I have a cane. I know a lot about parking issues. Thankfully, I have my disabled vet plate now, so that helps. But we're all aware that there are parking issues on campus, but they're claiming that this will restore 200 spaces, and it actually won't, because I just spoke with Ryan Ward, who's, I believe his title is Head of Space and Capital Management. We looked at the overviews that they've just published again for October 22nd. They have to do like their quarterly updates. So we're actually looking at it, and he was starting to say, well, see, it'll restore 200. And I said, yeah, but can you zoom in on Crossland Hall? And if you keep zooming in and you actually look at it, it's not 200 spaces for a building that's first floor plan is about 5,000 square feet. So we're talking about the loss of a historic building that has logs in the basement, where if you go down there, you can actually see that it's clearly maybe older than 1833. I can at least date it to Hannibal Longfellow building it, where it's actually has logs for its foundation, which predate it to the sawmills up here. So it's a very historically important building. There's also obligations to when the town was generous enough to establish the university back then. They did hold them to an obligation saying that if you were no longer going to use the property for educational purposes, you have to return it to the town. That was later amended to say that the state would have to pay the town of Orono for the cost if they were going to destroy the building, or if they were going to cause any harm to any of the property or no longer be. So this might be something that you guys would be interested in looking into, not only because Franco-Americans are under attack right now. That center where they're being put into right now, they cannot operate out of. I've spoken to countless people about this. It is a very clear issue where they will not be able to function anymore as a center. It will be defunct after this. And it's not only an issue of fiscal irresponsibility, of historic destruction, but there's so many different components that are coming into this that it's a real serious problem just for maximum maybe 70-ish parking spaces that it can be relocated elsewhere, but the university is not wanting to work with us. And I just had another conversation with them today, and they are resisting any changes to their plans. And they instead were like, well, maybe if we remove some of the logs and have them preserved, then you can have some memories of the building and we can scan it. And that's not really how you remember history or anything like that. So I don't mean to like just dump this all on you and then leave. But I do actually have to go over to the Hampton Historical Society because there are a bunch of folks over there that are also really concerned about this. As I said, we do have 1,000+ signatures on our petition right now, and it just started last week. So a lot of folks have been asking for explanations, but is it okay if I share all of my research and information with you all and give you guys some contact information?
Yeah, it would be one. Yeah, our emails are all on the website. If you want to shoot
Wonderful.
us an
Thank
email
you.
with kind of if you could kind of give us be helpful if you give us kind of an overview, like a 1-pager, to kind of
Absolutely.
walk us through it, and then key dates, kind of the bottom line up front,
Yes.
for that kind of stuff, just so we have an awareness of it.
You mean that me just like spilling it at you at like 6 o'clock at night isn't the most
The 80
helpful-
page.
I just learned a ton.
Something
Thank
gets-
you.
But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah,
thanks
I
for
can
joining us
happily do
tonight.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you. I appreciate it. So
Yep.
thank you guys for listening. Y'all have a good night.
Yep. Is there anybody online, Mitch, that we need to hear that has their hand raised? I should never. What's that? Okay. Anybody else? You have something else, Sarah?
But waiting on the public for
Yeah.
sure. Nothing
All set? Yep.
Okay. I appreciated your question about sort of the process, Dan, and like, I do think we booked 2 hours, and I think this is our time to say things as a council if we have them, because I think that's respectful to the committee that they hear them now as early as possible. I 100%, I think it's a great plan. Everything I'm bringing up is teeny tiny little things that I just thought could help to make it even just a tiny bit better here and there. And I hope if other people have them, they'll speak up. I don't want to take public time for that on Wednesday, I guess is what I'm saying. So my next one is, again, a small thing, but I think perhaps an important thing on the community vision document on page 23. I just want to ask whether the language around the Penobscot Nation, has been vetted at all through the work going on with McCoy Museum Solutions. It's not exactly the same language that I've seen elsewhere. I know when we looked at some of these statements before, a few years back, when the council made their resolution regarding Penobscot ongoing presence and historical presence, that it was important that the language not imply that somehow it was historical presence that wasn't ongoing. So I'm not sure the term here says located on the ancestral lands of the Penobscot Nation. And I would just want that looked at and thought about. I do know other statements like on campus use on the in the homeland of the Penobscot Nation as a phrase. I've seen located on the unceded lands of the Penobscot Nation and other statements. So, and I know if we looked up our own resolution, I think it had language about ancestral and ongoing presence. So I just would ask that we take a look at it and make sure it's in alignment with everything we've been trying to do to be respectful about ongoing Penobscot presence. That was one. And then I wondered.
We talk about so as staff, you guys have that, Mitch?
I thought Isabel was listening, so maybe she said she was going to listen later, or maybe Mitch can answer if it's already been done.
Like I said, this is being recorded, so when it
Okay,
gets
she'll
here,
grab it.
we'll
Okay.
get it and we'll make sure that information gets to who it
Okay.
gets to.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And I wanted to highlight, there's a lot of stuff in this plan around protecting water and protecting water quality, really respecting the river, making sure that we're doing everything we can around our own water cleanup. I really appreciated the emphasis in these plan at near the end about really treating the river and our water as, an important aspect of our town, not as just a, resource that we extract things from, but something that we want to really respect and celebrate and honor. And I really respected that in the plan. And then on page 27, I had a question. It highlights that we want to look at development, if possible, within a 3/4 mile radius, it said, of jobs and school. And I didn't see a map anywhere that showed me what that 3/4 radius looked like. I'm assuming it was what was used to develop where the growth areas should be. But I think the growth area is bigger probably than the 3/4 mile radius, and that's great. But I wondered if it's helpful to show us where that is as we're moving forward with the plan, to know, not just do we have this larger growth area, but maybe this goal to really especially do the 3/4 mile radius. And I think that's all I've got. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions or suggestions that we'll get up on the recording for Isabel to take a look at? Okay, I think we might be done. If there's nothing else, I think we might be done early. Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody. And thanks to the good work of the planning department team. Good night. Or no.